What's up, dude? Have you ever noticed that things just used to taste better? I don't know if they were cooked with more love, more technique, more skill, or more knowledge, but for me, that's really true. So in order to keep the culinary wisdom alive and present in this modern age, I created this series called Forgotten Classics, where we recreate recipes from the past. Today, we're making Entercote Bordelaise, which is a recipe that comes from the 3 Michelin star chefs, the Roux brothers. They are some of my absolute favorites. Now let's go! Now to begin, in the book, they serve these with sauteed mushrooms or pureed potatoes. I thought it could be nice today to serve this with Joel Robuchon's famous mashed potato recipe, which has an absolutely insane amount of butter. I might cut back on that a little bit, but it's really about the process and technique, and these are gonna be some of the best mashed potatoes you probably will ever try, I guarantee that. I'm using Yukon Gold potatoes, and when you make this recipe, just try to find potatoes that are roughly the same size, and more on the smaller side is a little better. They don't take as long. So those go straight in just with a little bit of water, just enough to cover. And now I'm going in with a couple tablespoons of gray sea salt, straight in. And we'll turn this on and let these potatoes slowly simmer away just until fork tender. So after 50 minutes, that's 5-0, not 15. A lot of people get that confused. They do sound similar. I'm gonna pull out my potatoes, and keeping them in the peels like this is gonna help you retain a little bit of flavor as opposed to peeling them first. I think that's why Joel Robuchon invented it this way. You can tell they're done because they're just fork tender like this when I insert a little thermometer in, and also that skin will begin to crack and peel like you see right here. And I'm gonna let them cool for a few minutes first because they're just a little too hot to handle right now. Now at this point, we're just gonna take a little paring knife and just begin to peel away. Now these are excruciatingly hot. I'm in a lot of pain right now. Just kind of playing it off. This is terrible. Ow! Let's not get anything confused here. This is tough. But what you can do is just keep it on the board here, scrape a little, and just push it off like this. In all honesty, my friends, you should just probably wait longer. I'm a little impatient, so I'm just going for it. Now, while those potatoes are still hot, we're gonna use one of these essential kitchen tools, if you ask me, which is a ricer. I just buy this OXO one. It's served me well for years. They, in fact, just changed the design to have it be all metal, so I don't think it'll really ever break, I would hope. Link in description if you need one, and what we're gonna do is just push this through. I really enjoy doing this. It's one of those little satisfying things you get to do in the kitchen. It just rices it through, and it's gonna get you a texture that is just so much better than using a hand masher. There's really no debate on that. 1,000 chefs will tell you the same thing. Potatoes are riced and back in the pot they cooked in. I'm just turning on the heat just to around medium, and we're doing this last little drying out phase, which is just gonna remove any excess moisture that would be in these potatoes. We're just sort of concentrating everything here. It's been about 3 minutes, and that potato is starting to stick to the bottom, and it's clumping together a little bit. Feels a lot drier. At this point, I'm gonna turn the heat basically off, really low, and we're gonna start adding in a whole bunch of cubes of cold unsalted butter. Now here's the thing, these are Joel Robuchon's famous mashed potatoes. There's a ½ pound of butter, so 8 ounces to about 2.2 pounds of potato. You do not have to do that much. For the purpose of YouTube and just being decadent, I'm gonna do it because I'm sure you guys wanna see what that's like. Of course, you could add 4 ounces, that would be totally fine. Once that butter's pretty much melted in, we're gonna go ahead and add more and just keep working that together. I'm not mixing like crazy at this point because I don't wanna overwork the potatoes, but I'm just making sure to get that butter mixed in nicely. Wow, how about that, huh? At which point I'll add more. So really I'm adding this butter in about 4 or 5 stages. You can see it's really coming together here. Let's add the last bit of butter. This mashed potatoes are about 100 calories per teaspoon. Now at this point, they are just far too buttery, far too dense. So what is coming in to save the day? Some milk. Full fat, of course. I'm gonna add this little by little as well, or just in about 2 or 3 stages. Work in your milk. And once all your milk is worked in, let's taste for seasoning, which there really isn't any because it was only in the water for the potatoes. You're gonna season up your potatoes. I'm just doing some nice sea salt here. And then obviously they're absolutely delicious to eat just like this. However, we're gonna take it to the next level using a drum sieve, which is gonna get your potatoes as fine as possible. It's definitely excessive, but this is what they do in very fancy restaurants. And what we're gonna do is use a tool like this to just push it through. Simple as that. Once it's through, go ahead and add more. And just repeat with all your potatoes. It actually doesn't take that long, and I quite like doing it. It just feels kind of fun. And before you take this thing to the dish pit, make sure you get all that. Look at that. It's just full of potatoes on the bottom. Now, before finishing up this recipe, let me introduce today's sponsor, BetterHelp, who is on a mission to make starting therapy much easier. Personally, I've been doing therapy for 4 years now, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. There really is no shame in it. It is just super helpful. And quite honestly, I really enjoy the process of learning more about myself, as well as gaining new tools I can use to improve my overall emotional well-being. Therapy can be tremendous support, whether you're navigating a rough patch or battling with serious mental health concerns like anxiety, anxiety or depression. It can also help you develop healthier habits so you can have a really good foundation for your life moving forward. And with BetterHelp, you can choose between phone calls, video chats, or even text messaging for your sessions. It really is about what works best for you. Fill out a questionnaire and they will match you with a therapist in as little as a couple days. One of the best features of BetterHelp is if you don't feel like the first therapist is the right fit, you can easily switch to another one until you find one that you really connect with. There's also a journal you can use inside the platform for personal reflection, and there are group sessions on a number of different topics available every day. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/ThatDudeCanCook to save 10% off your first month of therapy. Now back to the recipe. Now that our potatoes are done, let's prepare the bone marrow and get ready to build this sauce. My bone marrow has been soaking in cold water for about 30 minutes. In the book, they say to crack the bone and then get the bone marrow out raw. I'm not gonna try to crack this bone, but it should just push out. Wow, that was so easy. I thought that was gonna be a struggle. Actually just came right out. Look at that, looks like a little crab stick, doesn't it? Interesting. This one's a lot bigger. Let's see how easy this goes. I've gotta get it out this way. Oh, this one's giving me trouble. It's not coming out, no chance. Oh God. So what I'm gonna do as a plan B is just to sort of use a spoon, just scoop it out. Not ideal. This isn't exactly what we wanted to do, but I'm not gonna try to crack this with a cleaver. That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. So I'm just scooping it out. Maybe now we can push the other side out. Look, it's coming. It's coming a little bit. See it? There it is. Push, push, there we go. And I got a little more bone marrow right there. Get that out, and that's all she wrote. We'll just deal with that. Now, I've never worked with bone marrow in this specific way, but what we're gonna do is drop this into really cold water. This is the instructions in the book, which are pretty vague. This recipe is written in like about 3 sentences. We're gonna put it on the fire and bring it to the boil, and as soon as that happens, we're gonna shut off the heat and leave it in there until we're ready to use it. Hopefully it doesn't just melt. I'm gonna turn it off right now because I already see that kind of melting and I don't want it to cook anymore. Before starting the sauce, we're gonna make what's called a bouquet garni, which is essentially a little satchel of aromatics that can be put in sauces or stocks to give them extra flavor. You can either wrap your ingredients in cheesecloth with a little bit of string, or the classic way of doing it using the tops of leeks, which I prefer. It just looks cool. So here I have a leek. This is the part you're generally gonna cook. This is the part you're generally gonna use for stock or even throw away. And so we just take that off. And what you wanna do is find a few good pieces of this top and then rinse them off because generally they're gonna be pretty dirty. And then this right here is a little bit too big. So I'm gonna go ahead and just make these a bit smaller. It needs to be something about like this size is fine. And what we'll do is just cut a few pieces of this butcher's twine, space out your leek a little bit and just lay it down there. And then we're gonna put in all the aromatics and herbs that we're using. I'm doing a little thyme, a little bit of parsley, a clove of crushed garlic, a couple of bay leaves here, and this one's a little classic French, a onion stuck with cloves. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but that's very old school right there. Cloves pretty powerful, so I'm only gonna do about 5 pieces here. Stick that in there, and then we'll begin to just tie this up. It's okay if a little bit is sticking out, something like this. I like to do 3 of them, just like so. Tie some little knots, one more down here. And then I would cut off this excess string, except for one piece, which you can use to then pull it out later. And that's your bouquet garni done. You know, French restaurants will prepare a ton of these ahead of time, and then they'll have them ready to go for braising, for soups, for sauces, etc. And this specific bouquet garni is spec'd for red meat, but if you're doing something like fish, you might add dill. If you're doing something like chicken, you might add tarragon, so you can spec them to what you're cooking. To start the sauce, we're gonna begin by slicing up our shallots. I'm gonna go ahead and do them julienne. They didn't really specify in the book, but I think this is absolutely fine. Medium heat pot, we're gonna add a little bit of butter. I always like to tilt it a little bit just in case my pan was too hot. It's not gonna burn. It's a good trick you can use when you're melting butter. I'm gonna go in with my shallots, and we're gonna cook these down for 2 or 3 minutes, but without any color. We're really just sweating them right now. At this point, I'll turn up the heat a little bit, and I'm gonna add my red wine. This is a Bordeaux, as my French gurus recommend. We'll also now lower in our little bouquet garni. In it goes. And Sergeant Gilbert reporting for duty. That's black pepper, and we're doing sort of larger chunks here. I've just unscrewed Gilbert's head a little bit. They want coarse pepper in here, so in it goes. And that's all she wrote for now. We're gonna reduce this by 1/3. If you want, you can try to light this up. Some wines do it, some wines don't. Yeah, a little bit. Kind of hard to see without the light. The downside of doing that, the string right here is burning. I just push it under there, it's fine now. But if I were to have that string like on the outside, it definitely would have burned, so be aware of that. I just like fire. My dad was a pyromaniac. He used to light stuff on fire all the time. He burned down a bunch of stuff, you know? So I think it's just in me, it's innate. There we go, reduced by 1/3. Now we're gonna go ahead and add in our beef stock. They use veal stock, but you know, I have homemade beef stock on hand, that's what I'm doing. And so now we're gonna reduce the heat, just to bring this to a simmer this time, and we're gonna let this cook down again. And once it's reduced with the beef stock, for about 20 minutes, I'm gonna pull out the bouquet garni, give it a little squeeze. And apparently in the book, they serve it quite watery like that, but I'm not really down with that. So what I'm gonna do is reduce this till it's a little bit syrupy and thick. There we go, that's a little bit syrupy and it's starting to coat the spoon. I'll turn the heat all the way down to low and we'll finish with a little bit of cold unsalted butter. Go ahead and work that in. Don't need too much. I think we have enough butter in this recipe. And once that's all worked in, I'm gonna shut off the heat completely. And since my homemade beef stock doesn't have any salt really, just a tiny bit, now we're gonna season to taste with salt and freshly ground black pepper. Let's give our sauce a taste. Look at that beautiful sauce. That's delicious. A little more pepper, a little more salt. Now with the heat off, I'm adding in my little chunks of bone marrow as per the suggestion from the book. And I'm gonna get that under the sauce and I'm simply gonna let it poach in here for a few minutes so it can finish cooking, but I don't want it to melt into the sauce. We want these little chunks that we can serve on top of the steak like so. Now it's time to work with our hunk of meat here. I got a big bone-in ribeye and I'm just gonna hit it with a touch of oil and then season it up. I'm using a little bit of rosemary salt. If you know, you know. I'll put a link to that recipe and video down in the description. Just a homemade salt we make here on this channel. Really tastes like the holidays. Definitely something you're gonna wanna learn before Thanksgiving and Christmas. So make sure to subscribe, otherwise you're not gonna learn it. So you have to subscribe and also buy everything I've ever made. And remember, when you have a big piece of meat like this, you're gonna do almost double the seasoning you would do if it was half the size, right? Because there's just so much of the interior. It's really thick, so it can really handle all that seasoning. I've had my pan on high heat here for 3 or 4 minutes. Now I'm gonna add a little bit of neutral oil, that's avocado. I'm gonna wait for that to ripple. Now we're gonna carefully lay in our steak. Hopefully that fits, perfect. Put a little pressure on there, make sure it's got a good contact to the pan. And now at this point, I have the heat medium high. There was already so much heat in the pan. Not full whack, just a touch under. And because this steak is so thick, I'm gonna let it sear for about 3.5, 4 minutes per side. That's been exactly 4 minutes. And we got a beautiful sear going. By the way, don't do what I'm doing. You wanna use a tool probably, and we'll do 4 minutes on the other side. At this point, I'm gonna go into a 325-degree oven until it hits about 125 internal. And after 10 minutes in the oven, I'm gonna let this rest for at least 10 minutes. It's a big piece of meat and it needs that amount of time. All that's left to do now is plate up our dish and give it a taste. All right, Marcus, here we go. It's a little bit of a sloppy looking dish, but honestly, those are the best kind of dishes if you ask me. I'm going for some of this cap right here. You know what? Get some bone marrow on your bite. I say get a little everything. Sauce, bone marrow. I mean, I like having it with a bite of a bone marrow. You know, this is an incredibly rich, wintry dish. Nobody's gonna get this and be upset. However, I will say though, for my personal taste, as my years go on and I continue to cook, I've really reduced the amount of wine I put into these kinds of dishes. I feel like the ratio of wine to beef stock is just a little off. I would have done like 75% beef stock, 25% wine. When you have too much red wine in your sauces and your food, you get this little kind of dry astringency thing in your mouth. It kind of dries out your mouth in a way that I don't really like. That's my only gripe, really. You know, besides that, the potatoes are awesome. Sauce tastes good.
I don't mind the wine. I kind of love this. This is so good. This is so rich. If you'd like to kill a family member, make it for them 3 times this week, and I think that should do the trick.
It'd be a good way to go, you know? Yeah, this is pure decadence, you know? Give it a try. Marcus and I are probably gonna finish this whole thing. Thanks for watching today, my friend. If you have any recipes from the past you'd like us to try, definitely leave that note down in the comments. And if you like written recipes, definitely check out my Master in the Making ebook that has 55 of my personal favorites. They're all clear winners. And if you wanna keep your session going today, here are 2 more videos from my Forgotten Classic series that I think you're really gonna love. Until next time, you know I love you and I'm out!